what we'll do today is that we'll try to cover areas in the time that we have allocated to ourselves. We'll try to look at the issue around the hypothesis. We will look at the concepts of, such as operationalization, conceptualization, have a little discussion on replication, concepts such as reliability, validity, and the delimitations and limitations of research study. Now, before we do the hypothesis and all the good stuff that we want to do, we thought it would be appropriate that we just once more go back and do a quick revision on the issues around the research proposal, those 7 iterative steps that we talked about. The reason we do that is that everything that we do going forward is really just fitting into the research proposal. So you need to find synergy in what we are talking about and your own research proposal. So it's important, ladies and gentlemen, that from time to time we'll go back as we go forward. Now, here what we are trying to do is just to once more repeat, how do you choose an appropriate research problem? Or how do you go about choosing the right topic for purpose of study? This is just a guideline. So it's a framework within which you can ask and help yourself as you prepare your research proposal. Because choosing the right topic is important in research. The first process is that you need to look around. Because in many disciplines, questions that need answers, phenomena that need explanation are everywhere. As we walk around, we pick up problems everywhere in the discipline that you are studying. It doesn't matter what discipline it is. You need to read the existing research literature. We cannot emphasize the importance of literature review, more. That is important because it is there where you find out what is already available, what is already known, what is already believed about the topic. So they already have built in things that are known already, things that are believed already, things that are important or considered crucial in that in the discipline you are studying. The other issue will be you need to seek advice. It is not wrong for you as you study, as you prepare your work, to seek advice of experts. You can ask them, what is it that needs to be done? What are the burning questions that are still out there? What previous research findings did not make sense in the same discipline? Most of you are working with your promoters, your professors, so they will almost certainly be able to answer each of these questions, as will other scholars. So don't feel shy to engage them and ask them what is currently out there that you need to look into, because it's a collaborative research. Is more like a collaborative work that you do, and you're probably going to do it with the guidance of your promoter. Attend professional conferences. Many researchers have great success findings in new research projects at conferences, expos, all those kind of platforms which are your networking opportunities, where you will be able to interact with those that are already in the space and in the environment and the field that you want to study. It's important. By scanning the conference program, for example, and attending sessions of interest, you learn what's hot and what is not hot in your area. So if it's hot in your area and there's a conference coming about it, it's important for you to attend, because you can then pick up some of those research gaps that you can interact with experts on. So conferences are really great places. They are great places where a novice researcher can make contact with more experienced individuals in their field. Because when you go to conferences, you actually, as a beginner in research, or even as an experienced researcher, you're able to interact with others on the chosen topic. Remember, we're referring to areas that are of interest to you, because people really attend things that interest them. Choose a topic that intrigues and motivates you. This is very important. As you read the professional literature and attend conferences and talk with experts, you'll uncover a number of potential research problems. So at some point, you need to pick just one of them, because your selection should be based on what you want to personally learn more about. So you have to pick an area, because otherwise there's always, every day, as you said, there are always problems, questions that need answering. So you need to get to a point where you choose one that you feel is of interest to you, it intrigues you. And it's important because, remember, the project you are about to undertake, the research project, will take possibly months, possibly years, depending on how long you're going to take it. So you need something that you'll be able to sustain you, because you've got interest in it. So that is important, ladies and gentlemen. You need to choose a topic that you'll find also interesting and worth of attention. You don't want to study something that nobody will be interested in, including the very same people that, or subject or participants that you will be interviewing or interacting with, that they will find it less interest. So if your research adds an important piece to what is known by human race and understands about the world, then you will want to share your findings with a large audience. It's always important that when you have a topic or a problem that enjoys interest by many people, then you're more likely to get interest and invitations into some conferences, symposium, engagement, gatherings, whatever you call them, because people then would like to share you'd like to share with you their research findings. That's important as well. You need to be realistic about what you can accomplish. As a student, as a researcher, you need to really consider how much time it will take you to collect the necessary data. It's that's important. It's feasible. It's about really just looking at what is feasible, what is possible within the schedule, the scope, the resources that I have, and how wide can I go to collect the necessary data. Will you need to travel great distances to get the data? I mean, you are at the institution now. You're based in Johannesburg, for example. Do you really want to go and collect data from the UNISA branch in Addis Ababa? You need to consider those things, because those are now talking to affordability, budgetary constraints, and all those kind of things. So you need to, as a student, be realistic with what you can do, and whether you will need to travel those distances, or you could conveniently do research within the space where it is easier and more, the distances are not as great for you to travel. Will you need expensive equipment? Do you need to go and purchase expensive equipment, whether it's for collection of data, analysis of data, or report writing? Will the project require knowledge and skills far beyond those you currently have? In other words, what is the level of complexity and complications and so on, that you will need greater knowledge and skills to use in order for you to get to where you want to get? That's important, because the more complicated the research, the more demotivated you may end up being as you go along. So a simple way of looking at it is advisable, where you don't need a lot of knowledge, but you'll gain knowledge as you go along. So most research problems are too large or too complex to be solved without subdividing them. Now, if you're dealing with the most complicated and large problem, it is advisable that you subdivide all that into some smaller problems or areas so that you can focus on them more. So I hope in that we have now been able to capture the issues that we needed to capture for this purpose. And I am going to ask for your indulgence before we move into a hypothesis. If there's any comment, any reflection, any input that you would like to make, this is the opportunity to do so. Then we'll move into the next segment of the presentation.
But I just want to check, when you say seek the advice of an expert, of which is good, okay, is there any possibility that the experts can influence your choice of topic? Because as much as I need advice, as much as I need help, are they going to influence my choice of topic? I mean, sometimes you can be tempted to say, but you see, we are all subjective in our topics sometimes. And then maybe the advice you will get that, Marayan, your topic, it needs this and that. As a novice, as a junior, I may try to believe what my professor or my expert is saying and change the topic. Thank you. But the issue here is about the temptation of trying to sway or move away from my topic. Thank you.
I just wanted to find out, I guess my question is also riding on what Edward had asked, is when one speaks with experts, would that be would it be advisable to have a conversation with experts prior to compiling your research design, or how would one, or would that just be an ongoing process as you continuously work on your proposal?
Yeah, I like your second part of the latter part of your statement.
Okay.
This is an ongoing engagement. It's really ongoing. You engage experts all the time if you want to, up to the point where you have now finally submitted your research proposal. At times, even after you have submitted your proposal, you will still find that when you start engaging with the research and everything else, you may want to tweak and improve and change it all, around. Because remember, when you're doing research, up to the point, up until you have published the results, the work is still ongoing. So, and maybe what Edward is saying is, yes, it's important that when you go to an expert, you probably go there already with something in mind. There's nothing wrong with that, because the engagement is going to assist you in technical. I mean, like now, what we are trying to do here is that we're trying to help each other to structure our research proposal better, but nobody's doing that research proposal for you. So that's the kind of work that we're talking about. So you will pick one or two areas that are helpful, and that might help you in choosing the topic. So the promoter will not choose a topic per se, or the expert for you, but what they will do is that they will show you also around whether your topic is researchable or not, because it's important for you also to realize that there are things that you may pick up as we go along. For example, the elements of a research topic. Sometimes you see a student having a topic, but you don't pick up what is the subject there, what is the units of analysis, what is the population, and so on and so on. So at times you just need those kind of. So at times you just need a little bit of guidance from experts, but not necessarily that they will choose a topic for you. They will just assist you in making sure that the chosen topic it's a researchable topic, but they won't tell you, oh no, please don't don't choose this topic, that topic, and so they may advise you on whether or not the topic that you're choosing will be of any interest to anybody on the basis of some kind of sources. You can go to an expert and you get taught or helped on the correct way of referencing, for example. All those are that you need to be open-minded before you choose. This is just a guidance that we are giving you in choosing a research topic, not necessarily that you must do as you are told. It is just a guideline. I hope that that assists.
No, I'm answered. Thank you.
Welcome.
Me too. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's then move to what is always very popular, a hypothesis. I sometimes get into spaces where we speak and say, hypothetically speaking, what exactly do we mean by that? So I hope that if anything today, we'll all just take this concept and put it in the context that is technically available in the research space. So yes, let's see if we can work around it and have an understanding, because there are a number of definitions of a hypothesis. Well, the singular is hypothesis, the plural is hypothesis. So sometimes you don't pick up the SES at the end because it all sounds like SIS all the time. So there's a singular, there's a plural, all of which deal with how a proposition or a conjecture can be formulated and tested and provide the new raw material for the development of theory. So here we're looking at a proposition. Somebody say, I've got this proposition, I've got this assumption, I've got this conjecture, and that you are formulating and you want it tested. So as you formulate it, you then go out, you test it, and you provide the raw material, because there's a development of theory in it. So you develop theory by making those assumptions, you make those conjectures, you make those propositions. So hypothesis is an assumption or a preliminary statement of a relation between two or more variables or things that need to be examined. So in a hypothesis, you're putting in two or more variables that you need to go out and examine. So you put an allegation, basically. You make a proposition, you make a preliminary statement that this is what, so it might be something that you believe in, it might be something that you think is happening, it might be, so it's something that you go out there and you examine. And in doing so, you're going to develop a theory around it. For instance, we all know about fire and smoke, which is the X and the Y. That fire causes smoke. We all know that. So if you look at the variables there, we are looking at the relationship between those two variables. There's a variable fire and there's a variable smoke. So we want to see what is the relationship between the fire and smoke. The relationship is more causal. In other words, one variable causes the other. So if you see fire, you will know that what fire will cause will be smoke. So when we look at dependent and independent variable, when you talk about two or more variables, we really just mean that there's one variable that influences the results of the other. So you look at that relation. So the relation between fire and smoke is causal. One causes the other. I hope it makes sense. Now, what we are then saying here is, when you put a hypothesis, you want to establish the relation between two or more variables. Now, then you go out and you test it. So it's a specified, testable expectation about empirical reality that follows from a more general proposition. So you go out, you test it empirically. So you go, and how do you do that? Is the process of now collecting data, analyzing data, and data giving you whether or not your hypothesis or your assumption is being confirmed. So research is designed to test hypotheses. So in other words, you go out, you test the expectation. And that is where we say you've tested the hypothesis. So is it true or is it not true? Is it confirmed or is it not confirmed? Is it approved or not approved? You know, that's basically what you are doing. When you go and you test Pfizer or you test the different types of vaccine, you are testing the hypothesis whether or not they will be effective against the virus, which is the coronavirus, for example. So that test that you are doing is an empirical test. It's not what you and I believe that, well, it's a triple number or something. There's a test that has to be, and it must be an appropriate test for the appropriate assumption and proposition. So that, and we'll talk to that when you deal with validity. So in other words, research will support or it will fail to support a theory. So there's nothing wrong in you testing the vaccine and it does not support the theory. Then it means there's failed to support the theory. But there are also moments where the test support the theory. When it does support the theory, then the test has been supported the theory. And when it fails to support the theory, it has failed to support the theory. There's no wrong or right answers there. We just want to know how did the test go. So by testing specific hypotheses that are derived from theories and propositions. So the hypothesis will be that this type of vaccine will deal with this type of a virus. So that's a proposition, that's an assumption. And the more we test it, the more we want to confirm or disconfirm whether or not it is the case, you know, in point. So hypotheses are nothing more than tentative propositions that are set forth to assist in guiding the investigation of a problem, provide possible explanation for observations that are made. So it's an educated guess that researchers hope their data might support. So basically here you put an educated guess, you go in and you hope that your research will support. If it does not support it, it's just that the hypothesis has not been confirmed. I hope it's getting there. So let's look at some of the different ways that you can look at the hypothesis. There is something we call the null hypothesis, which is very common in the statistics environment. Null hypothesis predicts no relationship, technically, no statistical significant relationship, if we want to be specific, between the two variables, and it's always implicit in testing hypothesis. So if you've hypothesized a negative or a positive relationship, hoping that the results will allow researchers to reject the null hypothesis and verify hypothesis relationship, that's what happens. So if you go out and say there's a positive relationship between virus X and vaccine Y, and you go out, you test it, then they don't relate at all, that then can become a null hypothesis. In other words, there's no relationship at all. I mean, Disprin doesn't help in say, for example, dealing with coronavirus. I'm just making a simple example. So there's no relationship, whether positive or negative. So they don't relate at all. When we get to that stage where we don't see any relationship between crime and drugs at all, for example, we'll then say, well, statistically, there's no significance, because the relationship must be between variables must be significant for it to really be considered. So if there's no significant, and when we say statistically significant, we mean if it gives us, say 80%, 90%, or it gives us 10%, no percent, there must be a significant relation. The word significant is very important, and I think we're gonna see it more when we deal with measurements. It is very important then that when there's no relationship, whether positive or negative, then you have achieved a null hypothesis. The ex post facto hypothesis, in this context, it refers to, post facto refers to after the fact. So ex post facto hypothesis is that hypothesis that you create after confirming data that you have already collected. So in other words, you go out, you collect data, it confirms certain findings, and come back, and then you draw a hypothesis. So basically, you've done the work first, and then you come back, you make the ex post facto hypothesis. So it's a meaningless construct because there's no way of it to be disconfirmed. So in other words, you go out, you already know what I mean, that's fire causes smoke, and you come back and you say there's a causal relationship between fire and smoke. You know, the data that you have collected is already telling us that. So you come back and you form that as it's not wrong. We're just saying that there is something like, so when you observe an empirical relationship between two variables and then simply suggest the reason for that relationship, that's called ex post facto hypothesizing. So you observe the relationship between two variables, and then you just state them for reason of relationship, that there's a relationship between A and Y. That is called ex post facto hypothesis. So you are hypothesizing after the fact. You've generated the hypothesis linking two variables after their relationship is already known. So we already know the relationship. Then you just generate a hypothesis. Again, we are not saying it is wrong. We say it is something that you should know about. Is there anyone here who would like to share with us how their experiences were or will be when they formulate a hypothesis? When you do formulate a hypothesis, remember there's a relationship, there's variables, two or more, and then there is a population. Population as in who your study is going to be based or drawn from a sample point of view. So you can look at a relationship, whether there is any. Remember, we said the relationship can be between two or more variables. So it doesn't have to be limited to two. You can have three more variables in your study or in your research proposal. And you look at variables and you look at a population. You know, for example, I'm going to study X at Johannesburg, UNISA, for those students who are studying doctoral, masters, and so on. You've defined your variables, but it's not as well defined as we would like it to be. It's just an example of how a population comes in.
The issue of variables, né? But in qualitative research, it doesn't have many variables. And I think I prefer qualitative than quantitative.
What do you mean it doesn't have many variables? There's dependent and independent variable in research.
All right.
No, I just want to understand what do you mean by that?
No, I'm just saying qualitative is more of investigative than qualitative research.
Yes, I hear you, but I want just to talk about the variable part where you say it doesn't have, because we will deal with qualitative and quantitative when you do research design, but I want to understand what do you mean by it doesn't have many variables, because I want us to say there's dependent and there's independent variable in research.
Okay. No, sorry. I think it was a mistake. Sorry.
No, it's not. It's not. I want to understand. I want to pick your brain on this, because it might be that you've got something that might help us. Remember, we're talking about two or more variables in the formulation of a hypothesis. So I want to understand the context which you are raising it, because it's not wrong. We are not saying you're wrong. It is important to know that in some instances, yes, you'll have a broad hypothesis, and with the intervention and the assistance and the guidance, you know, by particularly your promoter, it will be narrowed down to a researchable hypothesis. Anyone who wants to take the platform and share their own experiences as well, or their own frustrations, or just an input?
So let's put it this way: the understanding of hypothesis and hypothesis testing, the theory, when struggling with it in the beginning years, was to go and look at the source and origin of where it started, and it finds its roots and origins in statistics and statistical theory, more so distributive statistics. So much so that I got so engrossed in it that I actually decided to enroll for basic statistics just to test the knowledge at that time, which was a good journey, by the way. It wasn't needed for any particular call it degree, but merely just because I wanted to get a deeper understanding.
Okay.
To cut the long story short in that, I still utilize that in the current process of having to do the work that we need to do when it comes to research. And what I mean by that is, we spoke about it the other night when you gave deeper clarity or context, when I myself also deviated away from what I would call the core that brought me to the understanding when we spoke about validity and internal validity, and the details around that, and how important it is to start it off from the sample, from the population sample, bring that population sample into a smaller sample, from there being able to work out what the mean is. From that mean, you are then able to extrapolate a test that you want to perform on the finite variable that you have, or the portion of that population sample which you now define as a variable, in terms of being able to determine what the impact is on what you are studying. And yeah, I mean, it's always difficult to sort of initially distinguish between the dependent and independent variables, and that's why today's mixed method is always an interesting one for me, because I still do sometimes get a little bit confused as to what is the best one to use. And over time, many have said, and like you say, consult with the experts. When you speak to experts, including people such as yourself, the answer will always be use the appropriate method that's going to be applicable for the research that you're trying to perform. Is it going to be impactful? Is there going to be learning from it? And if so, and you need to delve down both making use of qualitative and quantitative research in the same context, be careful as to the measure and length and of its extent and depth that you're going to go into, because by doing that, you could essentially be doing 2 papers instead of just one. So instead of getting to 900 pages, you can end up with 1,900 pages, because you're actually exploring both sides of the fence. And at some point in time, we must make a decision, make a call on it, and be specific in terms of what it is that we're actually wanting to find. And also relax and get to the point that some of the research is not for us now. You mentioned it when you started, that you said that some of the things that we study can take us months, others can take us years. And in that journey, at some point in time, we need to deliver the work and the results of our findings so that others can also weigh in, and that they too can contribute to the study that we've started. So for me, in summary, I think it all lies in the core, like you say, understanding what the hypothesis is, what the null hypothesis is, and if it is even worth testing a null hypothesis if necessary, or just merely to state it. And then to continue on the journey of the hypothesis and exploring the impact of the dependent or the impact that is being affected on the dependent variable by the independent variable on the field that we are studying, and the example between, for instance, crime and drug abuse. But it's always a vague one, but one can drill it down if one wants to study specifically the type of crime and the type of drug, for lack of a better word. To bring it into a more finite or laser focused approach, and also helping you later on to test the validity of the cause and effect on the variables. So yeah, that's it from my side. So far very good as usual, picking up a lot of stuff, and also being able to get new insights into maybe understanding things from a different angle when listening to yourself and some of the questions being asked, and the comments and insights from our other students on the call.
Thank you. Operationalization, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for the engagement. Operationalization. To test any hypothesis, we must specify the meanings of all the variables involved in it in observational terms. Now, I was putting Edward on the spot because I thought he's got a point when he was talking about variables. But then he sort of, was not convinced by his own argument. But I'm sure we'll pick that up as we go along. But at the operationalization, we say you need to test to test any hypothesis, you need to specify the meanings of all the variables that are involved in it. Because in some instances, it's got a number of variables that are at play. So you need to be able to specify what they mean. The reason why this is important in observational terms is so that we know what you mean by what you are testing, so that we know when we were to review your study. It really means specifying the operations involved. I need to know how do you go about measuring the variable so that I don't use a wrong measurement to a variable that you use a different measure. So we must be able to use the same measurement to get to, because all what we are trying to do in science is that we all need to get to the same, the replication, the reproducibility of your results are very important, the repeatability thereof. So I need to know that using the same measurement, I will get to probably same results, different results. I need to explain that. So in many ways we can attempt to test our hypothesis, each of which allows for different ways of measuring our variables. Now, what is an operational definition? Here we talk about a concrete specific definition of something in terms of the operations by which observations are to be categorized. So I need to know what you mean by what you say. Operational definition of, for example, earning an A in this course, as an example, might be correctly answering at least 90% of the exam questions. So you might say to me, when I give you an A, it equates to having answered 90% of the exam question. So then I know this is the operational definition. So A for me will translate into a 90%. Now, you may find that in different situations, A can be 70, 80, 100, whatever. But for this purpose, you're then saying you are using 90%. So you don't, instead of putting 90%, you're putting A. You put in, a simple A. So the simple A, where I see it, then I know I'm measuring the 90% that students might have received in the exam. So that's what operational definition tries to do. So once you've specified the concept to be studied and you've chosen a research method, the next step is operationalization, or deciding on your measurement techniques. I mean, you need to tell us, how are we going to measure the operation, the concepts that, or the variables that are within your study. So the next thing is operationalize your measurement techniques so that we know what your measurements are going to look like. Let me just test this by perhaps looking at the issue of youth. I use this example because I think it's easier. In your own understanding, what is the age of youth?
A group of people age 18 to 35.
There's a different definition that could be used depending on where I am performing the study. If I'm performing the study among people that think they are young, then I need to understand what the textbook definition of those who are young at heart is, and I can't use age to test it. If I want to test youth in terms of what it is described in the medical textbook, then I go and use something definitive as age. All right, so that's my interpretation, depending on
So
what
what ages would you
it
use?
depends. What do I want to study? Do I want to study the behavior of youths in South Africa, and then I need to go look at what does the research say?
Maybe let me put it this way, Vijay. What will be the agreed to age description of youth?
Prof, I'm going to say without me having sourced the relevant literature, I cannot make a definitive statement.
No, I actually you're correct in your answer, but I just thought the universal one, because we have not yet talked. Remember, the issue here is we're going to talk. You're correct.
Prof, I've heard people throw their ages 15 to 35. I'm just over 35.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I think I'm youthful.
No, that's fine. I think what we are trying to do, and I'm glad you are raising that, is we are not looking for, there are different sources that will say youth is between. I mean, what is the ANC youth? When the ANC said you're a youth, what do they mean as a source? Anybody?
Prof, we're losing your birthday, so they would go for the 18 to 35, and that will be stamped as far as that's concerned. And so we have a population we can study
from a perspective. Can you hear me? Am I still audible?
Now, yes, you are breaking up there, Prof. We're losing you. So if it's only me.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think it's on your side because Prof, I can hear him, but I think it's him speaking. If he can move a bit. Okay, let's check with Masuku. Masuku, what is a youth? Don't worry about technical discussion yet. Just choose a youth. If you go to the ANC and say, yeah, here I am, I'm youth. What would they be looking at age-wise?
According to me, I think youth is anyone between the ages of 18 and 35. Anyone between those ages is regarded as youth in South Africa. So I'll choose 18 to 35. So you say it's a South African. What do you mean in South Africa? What is your point of reference when you say in South Africa? What are you looking at? I'm looking at the parliament there. I think they've declared that 18 to 35 in South Africa it is youth. So yeah, I'm referencing it.
So for me, I think it also depends. I agree with Virgil. So for instance, I would say in my church, we consider youth from the age of 18 to 25. And then when you are 26 going up, you are regarded as an adult, especially, okay, when you are married, even if, let's say, maybe you are married between the ages of 18 to 25, and then you are no longer regarded as youth, you are regarded as an adult, like all grown up and all. So yeah.
You said the very important point that it depends on, like, there is somebody who defines the youth as 18 to 25, right?
Yes.
So if I go to the church, now when I go to the church and I'm looking for youth, would I go talk to the 30-year-old?
No, only why? 18 to 35, 18 to 25.
Exactly.
Those are the groups that they are regarded as youth.
Actually, let's use that example, Prudence, because that's the point I wanted to amplify with you when you're looking at operational definition. So if you go to church and they give you a report on the findings relating to youth, and yes. and you start questioning them about why did they not talk to the 30 years and the 35-year-old, you see you shall have missed the point. Am I right?
Yes.
Because in their case, they are not defining youth as 18 to 35, but at 18 to 25.
Yes.
So their operational definition of a youth is 18 to 25.
18 to 25.
Are they wrong?
No, according to them, they are not wrong. That's how they see it.
No, that's what I'm saying. Well, I'm now addressing just everybody. Sorry.
Okay.
Maybe let me release you. What I'm trying to say here is there is an operation. You can say you go through who defines youth in whichever way. I mean, if you go to NYDA, they may have a different definition. If you go to the ANC, they may define differently. Somebody said in Parliament is defined. So those definitions are important. You put all of them together, but then you say, for my sake, when I say for my study, I will focus on 18 to 25. I hope it makes sense. So you take care of the 12 to 35, because you see, when you talk to students and they say it depends, then you know that they're actually studying research. But here we were just asking a direct question to say, who's defining youth as what? So and somebody was saying, and I think it was oh, sorry, I forgot you now, that the 12 years are teenagers. When they start, talking like that, then you know they are looking for the right answer. And indeed, they are correct. You can say 12 to 35 according to this one, 18 to 35 according to that one, 18 to 25 according to this. All those are sources of your information. But then we get to a point where we then say, for your study, what will be your focus of your definition, so your operational definition? Will it be 12 to 35? Will it be 18 to 35? And I remember somebody said, I agree with the 18 to 35. And now when you start saying you agree with 18 to 35, what is the source of 18 to 35? Then say, oh, sorry, I'm no longer in agreement with that. There's nothing wrong in anybody defining youth the way they want to define them. All what it means is we first have to get the broad definitions. And when you've got all those definitions, then you narrow them down to say, what is your operational definition? In other words, for this particular study, what are we going to be looking at? And once we clear that, that's what we call operational definition.
Prof,
so, yes.
Yes, sorry to interrupt. Can I just ask there quickly before I lose my train of thought? Because Wendy did mention it's very interesting, and we're getting there. For me, just now, what I'm hearing very quickly, which is always a challenge, and I must say I agree with, I think it was Edward, that we become fixed in a particular style. Like I resonate more towards the quantitative, because I find it easier to sort of get data and also be able to find research and able to prove it or disprove it, versus the qualitative. But I want to now, for my new project, want to venture out into qualitative. And that brings me to what you are talking about now, the operationalization and the operational definition thereof. And at the point where I'm choosing where to go and find the definition of the variables, I am always tempted, but I want your professional and knowledgeable answer on this one. Tempted to use that as the point to determine the research method that I will use. Because remember, for me to be able to define, and that's what I was alluding to earlier on, if I'm using something as specific as age, then I'm no longer playing in the qualitative space. I have become quantitative. In terms of this is a specific, definite definition that we have. The interpretation of that then becomes qualitative, and then now I'm feeling, oh, am I going into the mixed method, or where am I going? Can I, at this point, decide using the operationalization definition and method, and technique, to decide on the method for the research design that I'm trying to choose, or is it too early?
I actually don't, I'm not sure I agree with you when you say.
And I'm asking a question to say, do I or don't I?
No, I'm saying I'm not.
Sorry, Vijay.
I'm not sure I agree with you, and we're talking a broad discussion now. I'm not sure I agree with you when you say, when you talk about something as specific as age, you are now moving into quantitative. Because an operational definition applies to all methods, whether it's mixed methods, quantitative or qualitative. When we deal with that, we'll look at it. Okay. All what you are saying here is, you are saying to whoever that is going to read your proposal, when I look at the youth in this context of my research, I'm referring to this kind of a category of people, or between these ages. There's nothing quantitative or qualitative about it. It's an operational definition at that point.
That I've referenced. Sorry, that I now have reference and that I can reference. So now I state, there's my opening statement. This is what I'm doing. And because I'm the student studying this, I'm saying that I came to this conclusion because I have the following references that support the way I think. That's usually how I do it. Is that wrong? Or?
Yes, what I'm saying. Okay, let me try just to do operational definition once more using the youth issue. I am saying the first thing you do, you look at the different definitions or different explanations by different sources of a youth from an age point of view, right?
All right.
So you'll have the UN define youth this way. South African Parliament apparently define youth that way. The ANC, the church. So all those are your sources. You're just telling us that you have looked around and you know who's looking at the youth from an age, and we're just picking up a variable called age here.
Okay,
so sorry?
That's exactly where I'm at. How did I go?
No. Let me just maybe let me release you so that I can finish the point.
Okay, go.
Yeah, all I'm saying is then you look at the different sources, and based on those different sources, you then say, for my sake, we are talking operational definition. We are not yet talking method or design. We are just saying, for my sake, for my study, the youth in this context, having looked at all those different definitions and explanations and outline and whatever, I will look at those that are between the ages of 18 and 25. So that is where your issues around internal validity are going to be zooming into. In other words, I need to know that I'm not going to read at the end a report that focuses on anybody below or above the ages that you. So you've set the delimitation and the limitations of this stuff. So that's what it is. So we are only at that level at the moment.
100%. And just to ask, and maybe just a bit of a well, it's a selfish question because I want to use this immediately when we are done here. If I'm, for instance, specifically studying the impact of digitization in the assurance industry in South Africa, would it then make sense for me to go and say, okay, fine, do I then not need to go and explore, which I already have done, what different sources or different groups or populations define digitization as? Because I've come across that some people does not see digitization as virtual, or the virtual way as digitization. Is actually a different definition for it. But I've done that purely by doing literature review or research of other papers. I have not yet gone in to go and talk to people about it. So therefore, I haven't decided whether I should do a survey, whether I should actually just use the statistics, whether I should use open sources that speaks to the public documents from our corporate statements of our companies that's in and around. So that's where I'm sort of like leaning towards. Because
okay.
If you can help with that, that would be awesome. How do I decide?
Well, I've got number of questions.
Go for it.
Because if you don't mind, we're using your example now for
go for it. We can help me. Can I type? I'm kidding.
Okay. So first you need to define impact, right?
Yes.
I don't know what you mean by impact. Impact to what? You know, that you need to know that there must be an operational definition or some. When you look at the word impact, it's relative. How do you measure
really, it? The impact that's being measured is the way that business is being done. So I do define the impact.
No. I'm saying the word impact will have different meaning to different people. Impact from which perspective, if you get what I mean. So you need to go and just simplify.
Yeah, I'm saying, okay, I get you.
Oh, okay. You need to remember, impact is relative. It's an impact on, it can be economical
stakeholders. I get you.
Yes. So I'm saying the operational definition tells us how are you going to look at impact from which point of view, right?
Okay.
Because there could be financial impact in terms of organization having to pay more now to buy softwares and what. So you need to be able to look at what are you going to be measuring as an impact kind of an assessment, because it sounds like it's an impact assessment kind of a study.
Yes.
Then the next thing is, if you then say digitization, you need to define what digitization is, because digitization might be defined differently by different sources. I don't have a problem there. Now, you then have to say, what is your understanding then for the purpose of your impact? What are you looking at? Because you're looking at digitization and you're looking at impact. You are making an assumption already, a proposition already, that there is impact, right? You are already,
my hypothesis is that
you are already creating a hypothesis that there is an impact that digitization has to what? You know, now if you say in South Africa, that is going to be very difficult, because South Africa is a big population. Now I'm not sure whether you want to study.
The population is the assurance industry in South Africa.
In the
assurance industry, not insurance, assurance. So
okay,
that's life.
Assurance industry.
The guys that do life covers and those kind of
things. So it's more. So you have narrowed it down now to say
7 companies.
There's an industry. So you need to say in 7 assurance industries.
Companies.
Well, you are saying industry, but company. So you need to say, what's the difference between an industry and a company? Okay, you need to go in.
Is just a second, Prof. The industry is the 7 assurance. Is the assurance industry. So there's a definition. There's an act that goes with that. The Long-Term Insurance Act runs with that, and so forth. So we have a definition. The people that I'm testing this with, or the population, is finite in the sense that there are only 7 of them who one can say function in terms of what the Act says is a assurance company.
So no, I follow you. What I'm saying is that then you need to remember we're dealing with the impact. You say I'm saying impact. You need to be more clearer in your content, so that when somebody reads it, you understand what is it that you're going to be looking at. Because I don't want to look at impact and I look at it from political point of view.
Exactly.
And it's digitization, or I look at it from a labor point of view and it's digitization and all that. And then you then have to go down, narrow it down and say, in the assurance, 7 assurance companies or whatever you call them in South Africa. So you're beginning to formulate a topic that is researchable. Because that to me is you're going. I still have a little bit of an impact, unless it's impact assessment. Because if you say you want to look at impact of digitization, these are broad,
you're 100% right, Prof.
concepts.
You're 100% right.
So
can I interject quickly, and just so that you can maybe help when you go further in your discussion? So for me, that impact that you just highlighted, and the research has shown this, am I going to be looking at the strategic decision that needs to be made by organizations in that? And we're looking at the strategic intent that informs that. What are some of the financial decisions that need to be made? And most importantly, how is this going to potentially impact matters relating to resourcing from a call it an operational perspective of the organization? So I need to choose one of the battles to go to.
Because let's look at this slide now, Virgil, and with everybody, because I'm just using examples.
No, go for it.
And I hope other students are able to see. They are able to see where we are going with it. So it's good you throw your issue first in the head, so it's fine, and you don't mind if we talk about it. Now, what we are trying to do again in what we have said is conceptualization, right? It's important because in surveys and experiment, you need to specify what concepts in advance. So in other words, I'm trying to say, you need to in advance tell us when you say impact, what must we expect? When you say digitization, what can we expect? Broadly and then, narrowly. Because narrowly means I know that when you look at impact, you're going to look at it from which point of view, so that the measurement that you are going to use is a measurement that you are going to measure exactly what you want to measure. And that's the first thing. So when you say 7 companies, you would have told us how many companies from a literature point of view are there in the assurance industry and the assurance companies and so on. So you then say, I'm only going to focus on 7 of the many, right? That's fine. Now you've you're assisting us in terms of funneling and narrowing the scope of your work. So conceptualization is the mental process where fuzzy and imprecise notions such as impact, or concepts such as digitizations are made more specific and precise. Do you see where I'm going with it?
I've got you.
So I'm saying it is easy for you to say impact, and you're thinking that it's you may as a researcher, we say, what does impact supposed to mean in this context? So then you make them precise and you make them specific. So that's what conceptualization does. So you want to, for example, somebody wants to study racism or prejudice. What do you mean by prejudice? What do you mean by racism?
Or age.
Or age. What do you mean by age? Are there different kinds of prejudice or racism? And if they are, what are they? So in your case, you say digitization. What does it mean? So to somebody, when you've got a computer, they may say, okay, I've got a computer, so I'm digitized. To somebody, when they've got a wife, so what does it mean? So you make those concepts a lot more precise, so that then we know that in this study of yours, what does digitization supposed to mean? So that what am I looking at when I look at digitization? Does it make sense?
Yes,
I hope it
100%,
does.
100%.
I hope it may. Okay, let's then move on to reliability and or reproducibility. So reliability, again, using the same example, we say, in terms of reliability, we're going to look at whether the questions, whether the results of a study are reproducible. Responsible is the wrong way there, reproducible. It is a matter of whether a particular technique applied repeatedly to the same object, to the same digitization concept, will yield the same results each time. So if I follow your methodology, I go to the 7 companies, I do what you did, the research design is the same and everything else, I should be able to get repeated results. Correct. If I don't, it's not wrong. It could be a number of other factors that could be looked into. So replication means repeating a study and checking to see whether the same results are produced each time. That quality of measurement method that suggests that the same data would have been collected each time in repeated observation of the same phenomenon. So every time we go through the same steps, follow the same route, we should be able to get the same result. That is why you sometimes hear this issue that if you do something over and over repeatedly, you should be able to get same result because it's the same thing over and over again. Now, if it doesn't work, it means it will not work for as long as you repeat it. But if it works, it means it will work for as long as you repeat it. Now, let me try to see if I can demonstrate this with a question that you can perhaps clear your mind with. If I were to ask you, did you attend a religious service last week? That kind of a question would more likely give me higher reliability, right? Because you can either say, yes, you did, or no, you did not, than the question about how many times have you attended religious service in your life. So if I'm saying, did you attend it last week? Or I ask you, how many times did you attend it in your lifetime? I would get higher results, higher reliability on the first one than on the second one. So what we are saying now here is that this question of did you attend last week as opposed to how many times, the reliability, the chances that I can get you to answer that over and over and get a higher reliability is higher than if it's more over your life, because your life can be 4, 5, 3, 2 decades. So it might then give me different answers at different times. So reliability criterion generally refers to the consistency of a measurement. So you consistently measure impact, or you consistently measure how many times last week, how many people last week did attend religious services than over their lifetime. So consistency is a necessary condition for internal validity, but it is not a sufficient condition. It deals with the reproductions of research findings of others and Replication, in other words, the repeatability, safeguard you against overgeneralization. So you only generalize to the population that you sampled, of course. Now let's just see if we can quickly, because I don't want us to lose this trail of thought. Reliability is concerned with questions of stability and consistency. So if I go back to where you've been and I repeat the instruments or the techniques using the same design and method that you used, I should be able to get the same answers that you received, because it relates to credibility and the repeatability of the findings. So the extent to which the obtained scores may be generalized to different measuring occasions, test forms, and measurement, it's important for reliability. So reliability, ladies and gentlemen, is only to do with the ability to reproduce your results. If you say to me, going to Johannesburg, leaving from Pretoria using N1, so all those things must be in first. And then I know using N1 from Pretoria to the north, using this road, this type of car, using this speed, in this condition of a driver, you know. So all those, when I do them, I should then arrive in Johannesburg within the time that you've arrived at, because it's everything being considered the same. So let's look at the validity of conclusion. Now, on the other hand, in conventional usage, validity refers to the extent to which an empirical measure adequately reflects the real meaning of the concept under consideration. So in other words, here with validity, we say this is what you wanted to do, this is how you want to do it, and when you do it, so you do exactly that which you said you will do. So validity really is the extent of which an empirical measure adequately reflects the real meaning of the concept under consideration. So with validity measurement, we look at the congruence between an operational definition, remember the impact or the digitization, which is an operational definition, or the ages 18 to 24, and the concept it is purported to measure. So you look at, you're not just looking at age. There's the age is the age that you're going to look at, is the categorization. But what about the 18 to 25? So we say first, when you look at validity, is there congruence between the 18 to 25 and that which you were interested in doing? So because you're not just saying 18 to 25 and that's it. There could be, I'm looking at the 18 to 25 insofar as phenomena X or problem Y is concerned. So validity is concerned with that. Is there a congruence between the two? So the degree to which measure does what it is intended to do, that's what validity does. So it's about producing credible, believable research findings. A term describing a measure that accurately reflects the concept it is intended to measure. So if you are going to measure the 18 to 25 or the digitization impact, then you have defined what impact is and what digitization is, and the instrument you used have now given you data. That is what validity does. For instance, the IQ seems to be a more valid measure of your intelligence than the number of hours that you spend in the library. So when we look at intelligence, we use IQ. The number of hours that you spend in the library does not necessarily define your IQ. So this must not be confused with reliability. So the hard work that you put in going to the library does not necessarily relate to your IQ, because when you look at intelligence, we use IQ. So those are just the measurements that would be applicable to you. Let's look at the delimitations, because I want us to have a broader debate after this. Let's look at the delimitations and delimitations. Now, the reason why those operational definitions are important is in order to assist you with your delimitations and your limitations. And when we talk delimitation, limitations, it's very important in a research proposal because it is a statement of the research problem that describes what the researcher intends to do. So you tell us, I am going to look at impact of digitization in the 7 companies, in the 7 assurance companies in South Africa, because there are assurance companies all over the world. So you are then saying, I'm not going to look at those companies anywhere else. I'm only going to look at the ones that in South Africa. And if they're only in South Africa in particular areas, you can even say in this part of the country within South Africa. That's fine. So that's what you are. That's what you have described. That this is what you intend to do. But it's also important to know what the researcher does not intend to do. So what you then tell us is that, yes, I will be looking at the 7 companies, digitization in these 7 companies, and I will be looking at impact, but I will not be looking at impact from this angle or from that perspective or from that philosophy. So you tell us that's not what you'll be doing. So in the limitation, delimitation, basically you are just telling us what are the parameters of you, or the scope of your research work that you are going to do. How far and how wide are you going to go, and where are you not going to go? So what the researcher is not going to do is stated in the delimitation. So you tell us, I'm not going to be studying the assurance companies insofar, or the industry insofar as X or Y is concerned, but I'm only particularly going to focus on Z as well. So that is a delimitation. Now, research problems typically emerge out of large contexts and large problem areas. Again, just using your example, Virgil would say, if you look at your assurance company, it's quite complex, quite large. So because of that problem, it's important then to do delimitations and limitations, so that we know when you look at your study as to what we are looking at and what are we likely to get when we go through your measurements. So the researcher can easily be guided and drawn off course by addressing questions and obtaining data that lie beyond the boundaries of the problem under investigation. So what delimitation does really, it just sets up a box for you, like your parameters, the 4 corners, that these are the 4 corners that I'm going to be working within. For example, I will not be looking at the HR issues, or I will not be looking at the finance issues, or I will not be looking. So you're setting out the limitation, the delimitation. But then you tell us, I will be looking at, so you don't only tell us what you not be looking at, you also tell us what you will be looking at. So in other words, I won't be looking at this and this and this and this, but I will be looking at this and this and this and that. So basically that's what delimitations and limitations is all about. So what I'm going to do now, seeing that we have a very vibrant group of students in the remaining time, I'm going to open up for engagements so that we go back to the conceptualization, the operationalization, the hypothesis, and we talk about it a little more. And then we include the delimitation, because in your research you will be required to have delimitations and limitation of your study, so that people then know like how far, what is the scope, and what are the parameters that will be covered, and what are those parameters that you wouldn't cover.
Awesome. So what I've gathered from this, what I need to now just go and sit back and do is clean up the title, or the thinking title. I haven't got the title yet because it's the one you stick on last. But and looking at, like you're saying, impact, I maybe need to find a different word, because I need to be more specific in terms of what it is that I'm going to be focusing on, and it's the ways of work. So I just need to go and look and see what that translates into. So thanks for that. The second bit is though, which is going to be, which you're probably going to answer the next for me, is now that I know what I'm going to be studying, how am I going to go about doing that? So now the question is this: am I going to go for a qualitative approach, a quantitative approach, or a mixed approach? And the reason I'm asking that is because I do have the option to look at the literature that's already there, combine that with the statements of these companies which they produce, their annual financial statements and their strategies, and look at that, and never have to talk to them at all, and based on that be able to come up with an answer. Or I can, by virtue of maybe saying, let's go do a survey and go and speak to the decision makers in their different roles that they perform, the guys that are responsible for this for the strategic design, the executive team of these different organizations, and get their feedback in terms of what they perceive digitization is in the context of the long-term insurance industry, and also what they see it is or as in their specific companies. And then together I'll have 7 different views and look for the similarities within those 7 different views. And then the most common one, I believe, will be then the one that I will say is the one that we probably need to research more on. The other ones I will not be looking at, for instance, like you say, exclude. I won't be talking to the CFO. I won't be talking to the head of risk or anything of that nature, or the executive in charge of risk. I'll only be looking at the people that are responsible for actual digitization as the chief information officer or IT officer, and the actual person responsible for call it the chief operating officer that deals with ways of work of the company. So that's what I'm gathering from this. I don't know if I'm still going off in the wrong.
No.
Slowly coming back onto the path.
What you are doing here is that you are assisting us in the lessons going forward. One.
No, you guys are assisting me, Prof. This is wonderful.
I'm saying you're assisting us in the lesson going forward. I'll tell you one area, and Edward, I've noted your hand. One, you are saying you can rely on documents. So that is what we call data. You can collect. Remember, now you're talking collection of data, that there are annual report, which is public records. And remember, when you do public records, that you are just going to go through them and see for yourself and analyze. That's the source of data, isn't it?
Correct.
Now we are not yet talking about that, but there's primary, the secondary, and the tertiary data that you can collect. So when you do documentary records, you can use documentary records, but also talk to people. You agree?
100%.
So in other words, you can collect data using documentary records, which could be secondary data, and then you go and you talk to people that have got anything to do with the subject that you are interested in, the problem that you're interested to resolve. And now what are you doing there? You are doing what you are interviewing them, but what the technique we are saying is triangulation, right? You are triangulating. So you are collecting data from different sources. You agree?
100%.
So you got it from documents, and then you go and you validate it by talking to interviewing people, and so on and so on. So when you triangulate, you are improving the quality of the data that you are using, because so that it's not data from one source, but at least it's different sources. But what I'm not sure of in terms of your survey is, because I don't know the population that you're working with, you might just as well interview all the people. I mean, if you say 7 companies and you're going to interview 7 CIOs, there's no need for you to sample there. You can talk to the entire population.
Okay.
Depending on how big, remember the sampling also works when you've got a big population. Now, 7 to me doesn't sound too big a number, but the companies might be too big.
They are.
So in other words, you're saying, you are now saying to me, you're going to only focus on those that are decision makers. I don't know who's a decision maker in the 7 companies, so I wouldn't tell you what is your population there. Because what is a decision maker?
You've opened up a different can of worms, because in that there are different divisions that are going to benefit from a digitization strategy. So when I say different divisions, so most of these organizations work on what we would call a federal system. Okay. So for each and every one of the different distribution channels and or operational channels, there is what we call a different CEO. So and there's a chief officer, the actual CEO of the organization, executive officer, and then each division or department will have. So you will have what they call an independent financial advisory model. Then you will have what they will call a tied or a agency distribution type model. then you will have a broker consultant type model. And so in between each of these 7 organizations, there's probably about another 10 people each to speak to. So that's roughly about 70 different people that needs to be spoken to.
So what I'm doing, what I was trying to do for all of you, Virgil and every other student on the platform, is just to say you need to have what we call a sampling frame.
Yes.
In other words, you need to be able to list all the things that you are saying, you list them. And because I'm saying a decision maker, to say somebody's a decision maker, it's a relative term, right? Because who's a decision maker? So
but
you might
find them then in the works that I'm doing.
Yes, then you might actually say, for the purpose of the companies that I'm talking about here, you're talking maybe CIOs, for example. I mean, I'm saying we cannot be able to give you an answer, but we can be able to probe what you are about to do, so that you realize that you can still improve on your proposal. Because for me, then if you say CIO, you would have looked at the records and say, what does the CIO or the CIOs across the 7 companies, are they homogeneous? Are they heterogeneous? Are they the same? Are they different? Kind of, you know. If your understanding is that they are doing the same things, so you may then say, okay, then I'm going to talk to all 7 of them, because you can put one question to all 7 of them, and they may give it 7 different answers, or they may give you 7 similar answers, whatever the case might be. So I'm seeing qualitative, and I'm seeing a survey there. I'm not sure whether you can then do it by sending questionnaires to the rest of the other people in the company that are impacted on the digitization, because decision makers are saying one thing, and therefore the employees may say something else, and perhaps even the customers or the people that they are saving, whatever the kind. So yes, once you start talking mixed methods, makes sense, because then you can have a one-on-one with the CIOs, but then questionnaires with the employees at a certain level. So there's a lot that can still be done within that.
Wow.
Within that proposal.
Sure, Prof. So basically, just to ask, so that means I still got to drill them down and maybe say, all right, fine, let's go and talk to the actual distribution heads.
Yeah.
And find out whether, what their understanding is. And then important thing you mentioned is actually the recipients thereof. So remember, there's 2 stakeholders. There's the stakeholders, which are actually the people that take their product to market. And then there are the stakeholders who are the ones who are the users of the product. They receive it.
And remember the impact.
Now it's 1 million people.
Yeah, remember now the impact. No, remember the impact is not by the decision makers. The impact is by the recipients of the service. So in other words, you're looking at the impact of digitization from those that must benefit from digitization. So I need to know, what was the intention of digitization in those companies? Now then you need to go and look at what has been the impact of that to the intended goal of digitization. I hope I made sense now.
Yeah, which horse am I going to settle? Am I going to settle the horse that speaks to profitability? So that means that because of digitization, or because there is a potential for digitization, they could see an increase in profit.
Yeah.
Or they could see an increase in market share. Alternatively, I can say that they can look at their client onboarding journey, or their client experience journey from a net promoter score kind of thing, which stats are available.
Right. So in your theory, in your outline, you shall have told us that they wanted digitization for the following reasons. This is what digitization was meant to achieve. And then it might have, as you said, different stakeholders and different permutations. So you then say, for you're going to look at this profitability as the objective, and insofar as the impact, if that's one of those goals that they. So that's what the research does. It
or sustainability, because with digitization, they are actually helping themselves to decrease their carbon footprint in terms of, for instance, the usage of paper. They don't have to do printer costs.
You said it,
is impacted and affected. Wow. Hey, I was almost done, Prof.
So it opens. So all what you are doing is that the more you interrogate it, the more you open it, opens your eyes that yes, indeed, you can't do everything. You need to zone in on what you want to zone in. It can look simple and small, but it's actually the way you studied.
And now I can't exclude international, because there are success stories of other companies in the same industry that have internationally had successes.
Yeah, what do you mean you can't exclude them? You mean you can't exclude them in the literature? Yeah, you can.
And on looking at them,
review.
Even though I'm mentioning that I'm not going to be studying international, there are learnings from the journey that they have walked. And
yes, so you can look at the, you first talk about, remember you must first talk about digitization in its totality, without you putting your views around it. Then you zoom into the area that you are more interested in from that point of view. But you should not limit the success of digitization or the challenges only to one or two companies, but you can talk about it in the broader sense and then say you want to see how one element of which is a thematic area for you applies to the 7 companies, whether they themselves have benefited from that, you know, in your own understanding. So you can still do that, but you need to be able to, you have to have a balanced literature which says those that are for it and those that are against it, those that have seen phenomenal profit and those that have taken a huge knock. All together you can put it in one discussion, and you then want to just zoom into the 7 companies and so on. So it's not, it's very interesting.
Is it presumptuous of me then to also give my take on it? Because remember, me too, not that there's bias on my side, because I am also a recipient of the products that any of these companies produce. So
you can in your write-up, and as you do your proposal where you've got an understanding, say, as a researcher, what is your own, you need to just be clear that it's your own view. As a researcher, your view, views informed by your experience or the work you do, and so you are allowed to state that in the proposal.
But I'm also impacted because I want to give myself a survey, because when I was doing this, I started with me.
Yes, I'm saying you can, because remember there's something we call researcher bias. So you can also indicate that there's a biasness on your part, which can be, which you have to control, and there will be, we can talk about as you go along. We'll show how you control your biasness in research so that you retain the objectivity, the validity, and the credibility of the study.
Should that at any point in time be mentioned in the ethical considerations towards the beginning?
It won't affect the validity of your research, but I'm saying you've got, because of your experience and how you relate to the subject, you state that. It must just be clear that that's your own views. So in other words, you're not precluded from stating your views.
Okay.
Is there any slight difference between operationalization and conceptualization?
Is there any
slight difference between operationalization and conceptualization? And then lastly, the issue of reliability. I have a challenge, Prof, because whenever you conduct a research, you always sometimes look at the gaps. So you can conduct a research about a hypothesis, and then I do the same research. I may not reach the same conclusion because there will be some gaps. So I just want to be clear on this one, because I don't think doing research on the same topic, if we are 5, we can end up having the same results. Thank you.
You said is there slight difference. I'm not sure whether the word slide. I mean, remember here we are dealing with measurements.
Okay.
So when you ask about slight difference, I want to know, how do we measure that slide? Because for me it's significant.
Okay.
For me, there's a significant difference between operationalization and conceptualization.
Okay.
So I'm saying there is not a slight difference, it's a significant difference.
Okay.
Because in conceptualization, you've got concepts. And again, if I don't know whether we can still use, I'm sure we can, Virgil's examples. We said, what is impact? Impact can mean many things to many people, right? If you talk to the government, the ruling party today in government, and you ask them about their impact of them being in government for all these years, they will have a different understanding of that, isn't it? Edward?
Yes.
So yes. They will have a different understanding of the impact that they've had over the years in the country. You know, they will. But then if you use the same issue and you go to a different opposition, they will also have a different understanding of the impact that has happened over the years. All right. So that's conceptual. So we need to conceptualize to say, for you, this is what impact is all about. But when you do operational definition, you yourself, you're saying, for my purpose now, I am going to define impact as just looking at what the customers feel about the brand, for example. So you're not taking everything else. You're only saying, for my purpose, this is what I'm going to be focusing on. So operational definition is what you choose as the meaning of the concept for your purpose.
Okay.
So youth is anybody who's between the age of 18 to 35. That's what somebody said. Youth is, somebody between the ages of 18 to 25. That's what somebody said. Youth is the ages. So those are sources. But for you, you are going to look at youth as somebody between 18 and 20 years. So you say, for my study, for my research, I'm going to focus on 18 to 20. Okay. So that's your operational definition. But the concept itself, the conceptualization is that you've got 12 to 35, 18 to 35, and so on and so on.
Okay, thanks.
Does it make sense?
Yes, thanks very much.
Okay. Now, on reliability, Edward, if I ask you now, how long does it take between Johannesburg and to the airport? Somebody is going to say 20 minutes, right?
Yes.
Somebody's going to say it takes the whole day.
Okay.
Somebody's going to say, so in reliability, we are saying, assuming that the A parameters, A to B, is well defined. Because when you say 20 minutes, you are right. But so is somebody who says it takes the whole day, they are right. But if I say to you, from Johannesburg to Pretoria, how long does it take? And you say 20 minutes. I'm going to say, well, I don't think it will take 20 minutes. Because it depends on the road I'm going to use. One, it depends on where I come from in Johannesburg. It's going to use on the mode of transport that you're going to use, the quality of the, and so on and so on, as an example. But then we in reliability, we are saying, assuming that all those things are taken care of. You are saying to me, I'm leaving from I'm leaving from the CBD at Bree Station using a taxi. How long will it take? And the taxis go. So the different routes, you must eliminate all those different variables so that then I know what is the mode of transport. What is the condition of a driver? Because mode of transport is important. Would you agree?
Oh, yes.
So if I am on a motorbike, you said 20 minutes, I'm on a motorbike and I'm leaving Eastgate Mall, and somebody is on a taxi going from Randburg. And somebody is going to drive a bike. So mode of transport, so you must not assume that you know what the question is all about. So you make it clearer so that then I know, okay, using a car of this engine capacity, driving at this speed, under this climate condition where it's not raining, and the traffic lights being working all the time, with no load shedding, you put all those things first down. And then you say, it will take me 20 minutes. So what do I do? Then I consider all those and I follow that, the whole process. This is where the research design is going to be important. I follow the same route and use the same condition of the driving, robots being working and really having everything pretty much the same. Why should I not arrive at the airport at the same time?
Okay.
If I don't, By the way, now that's reliability. If I don't say you lied, I would then look at each of these to your study 10 years ago. So Johannesburg did not have maybe load shedding in those years. You know, the changes was not as worse as it is. All those are what? Those are internal validity factors. So in other words, you're saying, you know, you consider the fact that 50 years ago, there were no WhatsApp, there were no Facebook and all these. So now that they are, they then can influence your research, but will not necessarily significantly influence your results. You agree?
Yes, yes, yes.
So basically, that's what reliability does. So listen, this is the technical work that we are doing, and it's exciting because then you know if somebody says, oh, it takes 20 minutes to get to Johannesburg, say from where, you know, what, I mean, using it, who might have aged a bit, has difficulty in eyesight, you know, the lanes are no longer as clear and so on, the routes are more overpopulated, and all those are factors that you consider. So when we talk about internal validity threats, things that can influence the repeatability of your result, those are the things we're talking about. So yes, if you do somebody study that has been done 50 years ago, you need to consider, you need to, it's almost like, you know, in a crime scene, there's a recreate a situation 50 years ago and see what are the because there are significant differences from 50 years ago and today. I hope I helped you there.
Yeah, no, thanks, because I was saying like I can use Uber, somebody bicycle, somebody scooter, somebody BMW.
Yes. Somebody is walking. Someone is walking.
Okay, no, I understand. Thanks very much.
Yeah, so you eliminate all those. You say not using Uber. So that's why earlier on when I was talking to Virgil, I was saying when you look at delimitation, then you tell us what you are going to look at. I'm going to use a state-of-the-art kind of a transport. I will be escorted because I'm a most important person. So I won't stop at any of the robots and you know. So when we know this is how you're going to do it, then we know where your 20 minutes is measured from. So then I measure your 20 minutes accurately. Ladies and gentlemen, we conclude our session here today that we covered the hypothesis, operationalization, conceptualization, reliability, validity, and the delimitation of research. Remember, you are moving from the left to the right, where you are moving to systematic observation, control, and replication as science. So you're moving the space of science. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you for really making time early this morning